The taxicab's headlights cut through the darkness of the country road, chasing away shadows like a dog after a rabbit. To the sides of the road, black trees stood still and watched. In the back seat of the cab, Danny Dennison clutched a $20 bill in one hand and a paper bag of clothes in the other. His shoulder hurt. He'd fallen asleep on the bus from Charlottesville to Elkton and had slumped down onto the armrest. When he'd awakened at the bus stop, the nerve in his shoulder was pinched and sore. He would have taken some aspirin for the pain if he'd had any. But drugs, even regular old painkillers, weren't allowed at the Heller Children's Home, unless prescribed by the home's nurse. And so, Danny didn't have any to bring with him when he ran away. He could have bought some at the bus station, but he needed the only money he had, the $20, to pay for a cab to drive him the distance from the station to his parents' house at the foot of the mountains. Danny took a deep, nervous breath. He was running away to his parents' house, and he didn't even know his parents. He hadn't seen them since he was 4. Danny looked out the window as the dark trees rushed by. "We getting close?" asked the cab driver. The man had tried several times to get Danny to talk, but each time the man asked a question, Danny had only given one-word answers. He didn't feel like chatting. His stomach ached almost as bad as his shoulder. What if his parents refused to see him? What if they yelled at him for coming and wouldn't let him in? They had given him up when he was little, but now that he was 12, maybe they would want him back. They have to want me back, Danny thought. I'm going to make them take me back. And if they don't, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll tell you in a couple minutes where to stop, Danny said to the driver. I don't want to go up the driveway. This is a surprise. Surprise, huh? Said the driver. You think you should be surprising somebody this late at night? It's nearly midnight, you know. You might scare 'em. I won't scare them, said Danny. They'll be happy to see me. They've missed me. How old are you? Old enough to take a bus and a cab ride home. If you say so. It's your dime. I wish it were just a dime. The cab continued on into the night. Glancing over the driver's shoulder, Danny could read the odometer. They had traveled 3 miles since the bus station. A woman who worked at the bus station's snack bar had told Danny that the Dennison farmhouse was about 6 miles north of Elkton. It was a big old white farmhouse on the right side of the road. The woman had given Danny a funny look when he'd asked where it was, but she had seemed too tired to care much. The driver coughed into his fist, then put his hand back onto the steering wheel. Danny pulled his paper bag into his lap. He wondered what the house parents at Heller Home would do when they found out he was gone. Oh, they would call up the police and have a search, that was sure. They would call up the foster homes he'd spent time in and ask if they'd seen him. They might put a picture in the Charlottesville newspaper, maybe on a milk carton, or put an alert out on the internet. But they would never think to call his real parents, because they didn't think Danny knew who his real parents were. A week ago, late at night when all the other boys in his cottage were asleep, Danny picked the lock of the Heller Home's main office building. He had gone into the file room and carefully opened the D drawer of a large green file box with a screwdriver. Flip, flip, flip through the files, and there, stuck in between a lot of other folders, was one with his name on it. Danny Dennison. He had sat down in the office, pulled up beside a window so the light of the moon would come through, and read about his life. He had been born to Danette and Ian Dennison, who lived north of Elkton, Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley. From the time he was a baby until he was 4, he had spent all of his days at the home of some neighbors, the Lawsons, while his mother and father worked the long shift at a nearby turkey farm. And then, the day of his 4th birthday, Danette and Ian Dennison gave custody of Danny to the state of Virginia, stating in writing that they were no longer able to give him a proper place to live, were unable to care for him, and he would be better off in another setting. What a mistake, Danny had whispered as he sat in the dark office reading his file. I'm not better off, I'm worse. Other papers in the file were records of the foster homes Danny had been in over the past 7 years. None of them had worked out, because Danny knew that the people didn't really want him. They only wanted the money they were getting to keep him. and so he would fight with them, and they would send him back to Hellerholm.